Today's code. Most women will never understand themselves. You will. I'm Bella. Welcome to the Bella Code. Most men have absolutely no idea how much women fake during intimacy. Fake enthusiasm, fake reassurance, fake emotional satisfaction. Not because women enjoy deception, but because telling the truth often feels emotionally dangerous. So instead of saying that didn't feel good, they stay quiet. Instead of explaining what's missing, they protect male ego and slowly disconnect behind the scenes. That's why some men feel completely shocked when a woman suddenly loses interest. In his mind, everything was working. In her mind, frustration had been building for months. The worst part is that many of the things women secretly hate are things men never even notice they're doing. Small behaviors, emotional blind spots, tiny moments that quietly destroy connection over time. Tonight, I'm going to break down the hidden frustrations women rarely talk about openly and why those silent frustrations destroy more relationships than cheating ever does. A man can walk away from intimacy feeling confident while the woman beside him is already emotionally checking out. That's the part most men never understand. You think attraction disappears after a major mistake. Usually it disappears quietly, gradually, internally. She smiles, she says all the right things. She acts affectionate. Meanwhile, in her own mind, she's replaying every moment that felt disconnected, awkward, selfish, rushed, or emotionally empty. Not because she enjoys deception, but because most women are taught that honesty in these moments creates unnecessary conflict. So instead of saying, "That didn't feel good," she says nothing. Instead of risking your ego collapsing in front of her, she protects it and slowly distances herself emotionally. And this is where men become dangerously blind. Silence feels like approval, but silence is often just avoidance wearing a polite face. A woman doesn't always leave because another man appeared. Sometimes she leaves because disappointment repeated itself too many times without ever being acknowledged. And the most dangerous frustrations are usually the ones she never says out loud. One of the fastest ways to make intimacy feel emotionally exhausting for a woman is turning it into a performance review for your ego. You see this happen constantly. The moment everything ends, the questions begin. Was it good? Did you finish? How was it? And on the surface, those questions sound caring. But women can feel the difference between genuine curiosity and emotional dependency. A man who truly cares wants to understand her experience. A man driven by ego needs reassurance that he succeeded. Those are not the same thing. The moment she realizes your confidence depends on her answer, honesty becomes dangerous. Now she has to manage your emotions instead of expressing her own. She starts calculating. If she tells the truth, will you become defensive, embarrassed, withdrawn? Will the entire mood collapse? So she gives the safe answer, the answer that protects your pride instead of improving the connection. And this creates a vicious cycle. You walk away believing you're doing everything right. She walks away feeling increasingly disconnected while teaching you to repeat the exact behaviors she secretly dislikes. I need you to understand something most men never hear. The moment intimacy becomes your source of validation, women stop feeling emotionally safe telling you the truth. And once honesty disappears, resentment quietly takes its place. There are certain turn-offs women almost never say out loud, not because they don't matter, but because saying them feels brutal, and most women would rather disappear quietly than humiliate a man directly. Poor hygiene, bad breath, an unpleasant smell, a lack of care, physical habits that instantly destroy attraction the moment intimacy becomes real instead of imagined. Men often think attraction is built through confidence and personality alone, but attraction is also deeply physical. A woman can be completely interested in you across the dinner table and suddenly lose that interest the moment she gets close enough to experience how you actually carry yourself. The painful part is this: many men never learn the real reason. She won't say you turned me off. She'll say she's busy. She'll say the chemistry felt off. She'll slowly become unavailable until the connection dies quietly without explanation. And because nobody tells him the truth, he repeats the same mistake with the next woman, then the next one after that. This is why self-awareness matters more than most men realize. Attraction is fragile. Small details communicate bigger things. Discipline, standards, awareness, respect for yourself. Women notice those signals immediately, even when they never mention them. And there's one signal women judge faster than almost anything else: the moment a man kisses her. Most men think a kiss is just the beginning of intimacy. Women often see it as the first real psychological test, because the way a man kisses reveals things he doesn't realize he's communicating. Some men are too aggressive too early. The kiss feels less like connection and more like pressure. Other men are so passive that the woman feels forced to carry the entire interaction herself. Then there are the men who kiss mechanically, like they memorized a sequence somewhere instead of responding to the woman standing in front of them. Women notice all of it. A kiss tells her whether you're emotionally aware or emotionally disconnected, whether you're present or just performing, whether you're paying attention to her energy or forcing your own pace onto the moment. And this is where many men accidentally destroy attraction without realizing it. They rush intensity because they think escalation creates excitement. But for women, emotional tension matters more than speed. When a man suddenly pushes too hard, too fast, the connection collapses. Her body may still be there, but mentally she's already pulling away. I've seen men lose women they could have genuinely connected with simply because they approached intimacy like something to conquer instead of something to read. A woman wants to feel understood before she feels opened. And if you miss that emotional rhythm early, everything afterward becomes harder because the deeper problem is not technique. It's the communication gap hiding underneath it. One of the most frustrating dynamics between men and women is this strange expectation that intimacy should somehow work without honest communication. Men keep asking, why didn't she just tell me what she wanted? And women keep wondering, why doesn't he just understand? Both sides end up disappointed. Neither side feels understood. The truth is, many women struggle to communicate their needs directly. Sometimes they're embarrassed. Sometimes they don't fully understand their own preferences. Sometimes they're afraid honesty will sound like criticism and damage the connection. So instead of speaking clearly, they hint, they soften, they stay vague, and they hope the man will somehow read emotional signals that were never fully expressed. But men are not mind readers, and relationships start breaking the moment. Guessing replaces communication. This creates an exhausting emotional loop. The man thinks everything is fine because no problem was clearly stated. The woman becomes increasingly frustrated because her unspoken expectations remain unmet. Then resentment builds in silence until one day she emotionally checks out and he's left saying, "I didn't even know anything was wrong." That sentence destroys more relationships than men realize because from her perspective, things were wrong for months, maybe years. She just stopped believing it was safe, useful, or worth the emotional effort to explain anymore. And modern relationships are becoming filled with this exact pattern. Two people sitting next to each other, emotionally disconnected while pretending communication still exists. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been inside a relationship where both people avoided the real conversation until the connection was already dying? Because what made this communication gap even worse was the way many men learned intimacy in the first place. A lot of men learned intimacy from performance instead of reality, from visual stimulation instead of emotional awareness. And whether they realize it or not, that conditioning follows them directly into their relationships. Porn teaches escalation without connection. It teaches intensity without emotional timing. It trains men to believe faster means hotter, rougher means more masculine, and constant intensity means confidence. But real women are not reacting to edited fantasy. They are reacting to how safe, understood, and emotionally connected they feel in the moment. That's the disconnect many men never notice. A woman can be fully emotionally engaged 1 minute, then suddenly shut down internally the second a man changes the energy too aggressively. Everything was building naturally. The tension felt good. The connection felt mutual. Then he abruptly shifts into behavior that feels disconnected from the emotional rhythm she was experiencing. In his mind, he's increasing passion. In her mind, the connection just broke. And once emotional safety disappears, attraction becomes difficult to recover in that moment. This is why so many women secretly describe intimacy as exhausting instead of fulfilling. They feel like they are constantly adapting themselves to male expectations rather than sharing a mutual experience. They feel handled instead of understood. One of the biggest lies modern men were taught is that intensity creates attraction. Sometimes it does, but intensity without awareness feels selfish. A woman wants to feel your attention before she feels your aggression. She wants to feel your emotional presence before she feels your physical confidence. And the saddest part is this: many men genuinely believe they're doing what women want because nobody ever taught them differently. Women stay quiet, men stay unaware. The cycle repeats. Then resentment starts forming in places most men never even think to look. One of the quietest forms of resentment in relationships happens when a woman constantly feels like her experience matters less than his. And most men never notice it happening because nothing dramatic is said out loud. The moment he finishes, everything stops. The attention disappears. The emotional energy disappears. The experience is treated as complete because his experience reached completion. Hers becomes secondary, optional, almost invisible. Now listen carefully. This is not just about physical satisfaction. It's about emotional meaning. Repeatedly feeling overlooked changes how a woman experiences intimacy altogether. Over time, she stops feeling desired and starts feeling managed. She stops feeling emotionally connected and starts feeling emotionally alone beside someone who thinks everything is fine. That emotional shift is dangerous because women rarely announce it immediately. They tolerate it, they rationalize it, they convince themselves not to make a big deal out of it. But internally, disappointment keeps accumulating, and resentment built quietly is often the hardest resentment to repair. A woman who feels emotionally neglected long enough eventually stops bringing warmth into the relationship. Not because she became cold naturally, but because part of her no longer feels emotionally safe being fully open with you. This is why some men feel blindsided when attraction suddenly disappears. To him, the relationship changed overnight. To her, the disconnection has been growing for months through small, repeated moments where she felt unseen. Neglect repeated long enough becomes emotional rejection, and instead of telling the truth directly, many women choose something even more destructive. They begin performing. Most men have no idea how often women perform emotionally during intimacy. And I'm not just talking about fake enthusiasm. I'm talking about the entire emotional experience becoming an act designed to protect the relationship from discomfort. She exaggerates reactions so he feels confident. She says things she doesn't fully mean because honesty feels emotionally dangerous. She acts more satisfied than she actually is because explaining the truth sounds exhausting, awkward, or potentially hurtful. Over time, the performance becomes automatic. And this is where relationships start rotting beneath the surface because every fake reaction teaches him the wrong lesson. Every exaggerated response convinces him that what he's doing works perfectly. Meanwhile, she becomes more disconnected from her own authentic experience. She's no longer present emotionally. She's managing his emotions while abandoning her own. That kind of emotional self-betrayal cannot continue forever. Eventually, women become tired of pretending, tired of protecting egos, tired of feeling emotionally responsible for maintaining the illusion that everything is great. And when they finally leave, men are shocked, completely shocked, because from his perspective, there were no obvious problems. But that's what fake harmony does. It hides emotional decay until the collapse becomes unavoidable. I need men to understand this deeply. A woman acting satisfied does not always mean a woman feels connected. Sometimes the performance itself is proof that connection is already disappearing. And the tragedy is that many men are so focused on doing the right techniques that they completely miss what women are actually starving for underneath all of it. Real emotional presence. Some men know every technique and still leave women feeling emotionally empty. That's the part nobody wants to talk about because connection is not built through memorized behavior. It's built through presence, through attention, through emotional awareness in real time. A woman can immediately feel the difference between a man who is emotionally with her and a man who is simply executing a routine he believes is supposed to work. One feels intimate, the other feels clinical, mechanical, like she's being processed instead of understood. And women secretly hate that feeling. They hate feeling like the man beside them is more focused on performing correctly than actually connecting with them as a human being. The eye contact feels absent. The emotional responsiveness feels missing. The interaction becomes predictable instead of emotionally alive. A lot of men think women want perfection. That's not true. Women respond more strongly to emotional attunement than flawless performance. They want to feel your attention on them, not your obsession with succeeding. There's a reason some women feel deeply connected to men who are imperfect, while feeling completely disconnected from men who seem technically skilled. Presence creates emotional tension. Presence creates trust. Presence creates the feeling that she is emotionally desired instead of physically managed. And once a woman starts feeling emotionally alone during intimacy, attraction begins fading in ways most men don't recognize until it's too late. She doesn't want a performance. She wants to feel felt. And sometimes the smallest signs of emotional absence reveal everything. There's a specific kind of silence women quietly resent. And most men don't even realize they're creating it. I'm not talking about peaceful silence. I'm talking about emotional silence. The kind where a man is physically present but mentally unreachable. No emotional feedback, no natural response, no sense that he's emotionally engaged in the experience unfolding beside him. Women notice that immediately. And strangely, the opposite extreme can feel just as uncomfortable. Overacting, forced reactions, artificial confidence, exaggerated behavior that feels more like performance than authenticity. Women can usually sense when a response is genuine and when it's being manufactured to create an image. What women actually want sits somewhere in the middle. Real emotional presence, natural engagement, honest reactions that make the experience feel shared instead of staged. Because when a man feels emotionally absent, women begin disconnecting internally. Even if everything looks normal on the surface, something starts feeling empty underneath it. She may not explain it clearly, she may not even fully understand it herself, but her attraction slowly weakens because emotional connection is not being reinforced. And this is where many men misunderstand women completely. Women are constantly reading emotional energy even during silence. They notice attentiveness. They notice emotional responsiveness. They notice whether you are truly with them or trapped inside your own experience. Women can feel emotional absence long before men realize they're emotionally gone. And what happens after intimacy often confirms every fear she's already beginning to feel. A lot of men think intimacy ends the moment the physical experience ends. For women, that's often the moment where the emotional meaning of the entire experience becomes clear. What happens afterward matters more than most men realize. The way a man behaves immediately after intimacy tells a woman whether she was emotionally valued or simply temporarily desired. Does he stay emotionally present? Does he remain connected, or does he instantly withdraw into himself the second his own needs are satisfied? Women notice those shifts immediately. A man rolling over, checking his phone, emotionally disappearing, or suddenly becoming distant sends a message far louder than words. Even if he doesn't intend it that way, many women internalize that behavior as emotional dismissal. She starts feeling used instead of connected, replaceable instead of valued. And once that feeling repeats enough times, intimacy stops feeling emotionally safe. This is why aftercare matters far beyond physical affection. It's reassurance. It's emotional confirmation. It's the moment a woman subconsciously asks herself, was this about connection or was I simply part of his moment? The men who understand this create emotional security without even realizing it. The men who ignore it slowly create emotional distance without realizing that either. Because attraction doesn't only grow through intensity, it grows through how a woman feels immediately after her vulnerability has been exposed. And when those moments consistently leave her feeling emotionally alone, something inside her eventually changes. That's when the awakening begins. What women secretly hate is rarely about one isolated moment. It's usually about a pattern of feeling emotionally unseen, emotionally secondary, emotionally responsible for protecting a man's ego while quietly abandoning their own truth. And this is why so many relationships collapse without men ever understanding the real reason. Because the real reason was never spoken directly. The resentment stayed hidden beneath politeness, fake reassurance, emotional performances, and silence that looked harmless until the connection finally died underneath it. Most men are taught to focus on performance, but women remember presence. They remember how emotionally safe they felt around you. They remember whether intimacy felt mutual or emotionally one-sided. They remember whether they felt understood or simply handled. That's the truth most people are too uncomfortable to admit. The dangerous thing about silent resentment is that it grows slowly. A woman can love you and still feel herself emotionally disconnecting piece by piece over time. And by the time she finally leaves, she often left emotionally months earlier. But here's the good news. Most of these problems are not permanent. Awareness changes behavior. Emotional maturity changes relationships. A man who can listen without ego becomes extremely rare. And rare men build stronger connections because women eventually feel safe enough to stop performing and start being honest. If this conversation made you reflect on yourself or on a relationship you've experienced, I want you to comment the biggest insight you realized while listening. And if you want deeper conversations about female psychology, attraction, emotional dynamics, and the truths most people avoid saying out loud, subscribe and stay close to this channel. Sometimes the truth that saves a relationship is the truth nobody wanted to hear.